Morning, guys. We are going to continue our discussion today about intelligence. I hope everyone is doing well out there. This is about how intelligence testing first started, and we're going to continue about talking about like what intelligence is. But today is the origins of intelligence testing. And it started out in France. The French government wanted to design a test to help distinguish between the average student and like the overachieving student, the highly intelligent student. And so they hired Alfred Binet, and he was picked just to develop a test who would identify the children, not explain why certain children were overachieving or underachieving, but just to label them. And Alfred Binet was actually kind of worried that testing like this would be used to label children and to put them in box as like overachieving, underachieving, or average. The same labels that we have today of like AP and DC or gifted and talented and on level and special ed and all these labels that Alfred Binet was kind of worried was going to put children in a box and maybe limit their potential. Maybe they were, underachieving early on in their at their education, but then maybe would have been overachieving if they hadn't have been labeled, and it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. And so it didn't explain why people were different, but it did just label them. Like I said, he feared that it would limit people's opportunities. So he came up with the idea of a mental age based off of this test. And a mental age is basically says like, this is what a 10-year-old should be able to do. This is what a 12-year-old should be able to do. This is what an 8-year-old should be able to do. Of course, this is a big assumption. Assigning a mental age is assuming that all children kind of develop at the same rate. And all 8-year-old children should be able to do these things because all 8-year-old children are like this, and all 10-year-old children are like this. And so the concept of mental age does take a big assumption that we develop at a certain rate. I mean, think about how education is today. You are put in certain classes based on your age. All kindergarten students need to learn these things and can. All first grade students need to learn these things and can and should be able to. And that's assuming that, there might be students that are well beyond that or maybe need more time. But we kind of just push them up into the next grade based on age, not necessarily based on understanding concepts or understanding, the what they're supposed to do at that age. So keeping in mind, this is still with intelligence testing and origins of intelligence, Louis Terman came along and he took Alfred Binet's test and just made it American. He translated it and basically made it American, and that's his accomplishment, I guess. And so now it's called the Stanford Binet test because Stanford is where Louis Terman worked, and Binet is that French guy from before. So he took Alfred Binet's test, made it American at Stanford, and there you go. This third guy, William Stern, he came up with the actual number, the IQ number, and like the equation to get it. And here's the equation. It's your mental age divided by your chronological age times 100. Okay, so this is why the average IQ is 100, because that means a 10-year-old who's actually 10, whose chronological age is 10, well, they think and act and comprehend concepts like a 10-year-old should. They have the mental capacity of a 10-year-old. So they're exactly where they should be. And so 10 divided by 10 times 100 is going to give you that 100 IQ. And so if, let's say, this 10-year-old, actually 10, birthday makes him 10, they actually comprehend and understand concepts like a 12-year-old should. So they're a little bit above their actual age. It's going to be 12 divided by 10. That's going to give you an IQ of 120. Let's say that this 10-year-old, unfortunately, was a little behind and only understood things that an 8-year-old does. So he's going to have an IQ of 80, which is below average. So that's why the average intelligence score is 100. And 2/3 of people fall somewhere between an 85 and a 115. So if you have, hopefully you have all of your notes. If you flip back to your research methods notes when we drew the bell curve, the normal distribution, it looked like this. And it had like standard deviations and the mean, median, mode was all in the middle. This is the same information that you're going to put in an IQ test. Like an IQ test is going to spit this out, with the average being 100. And the standard deviation for IQ is 15 points. So 68% of people, if you remember that's what the percentage was, 68% of people fall between a 85, which is 100 minus 15, and a 115 IQ. So 68% of people, that's a majority, 68% of people fall between 85 and a 115. That's 2/3-ish. 66 to 68%. Okay, so really quick, who did what? Benet and Simon, where'd it go? It says Simon. I don't think you need to know that. Just know Benet. Benet came up with the concept of mental age. Stern, he came up with the number of like IQ. And Lewis Terman, he just made it American. Okay. So what is intelligence? What is intelligence? I don't know. It just, the jury's still out on what intelligence actually is, but there's two big controversies. So here is the definition of intelligence. It's the ability to learn from experience, solve problems, and use knowledge to adapt to new situations. Well, in that case, both of these little characters, Albert Einstein and Babe Ruth, both these characters are intelligent because they can learn from experience, they can solve problems, and they can use knowledge to adapt to new situations. So why do we assume, like, when we talk about intelligence, we think of people like Albert Einstein, but we sometimes forget that that definition applies to a lot of different types of being smart and a lot of different types of intelligence. So jury's still out, but there are two big controversies. We're going to talk about these two controversies for the rest of the week. First one is intelligence one single thing? Or is it lots of things? Is it like you have it or you don't? Or you can be intelligent in some things and not in others? And which tools of modern neuroscience can we use to measure intelligence? Is it processing speed? And how do we measure that? So let's look at the first question of what is intelligence? Is it one thing or is it lots of things? Today, we're just going to talk about if it's one thing. And then tomorrow, we'll talk about the whole idea of lots of things. But there was a guy, where is the person? Charles Spearman. He says intelligence is one thing, and he called it G, or G factor. G standing for general intelligence. You either have general intelligence or you don't. He would be a strong believer that IQ, like your IQ number, tells you how smart you are. And that is your intelligence, because you either have it or you don't. And he actually used factor analysis approach to, which is, remember, breaking up tests into like subsections and seeing like what parts people do well on, which parts people do poorly on. And they basically said, usually when people do like above average in one section, they're probably going to do above average in almost all the sections. And if people do average in one subsection, then they'll probably do average. You're not going to find, like he says, Charles Spearman says, you're not going to find someone on like an SAT, let's say, with like a perfect score on the math section, but then in like the reading and writing section, they're illiterate and they can't spell a word. You're typically not going to find that. And I agree up to a point with him of, you aren't going to find someone in like AP calculus with 100 where they have a 30 in like science. That's probably not going to be the case. When people are like a B student, they're typically like Bs in all the classes generally, or if they're a C student, there are C's in mostly all the classes. You're not going to find like A's and F's typically on the same report card. So Charles Spearman just said he used factor analysis to discover that general intelligence underlies kind of all of our behavior, and you either have it or you don't. He would basically say like a number, like a grade or something, would be a great way to score someone, because either you have it or you don't. G. Okay. That's where we are stopping today. Tomorrow we'll talk about how most psychologists disagree with Charles Spearman, and they think that intelligence is more than just one thing, that there's lots of different types of intelligences, but they all disagree with how many that is. Is it three? Is it five? Is it seven? Is it 10? So we'll talk about the multiple intelligences tomorrow. And I will see you guys later. Have a great afternoon and enjoy the weather. It's such a nice day outside. Of course, as I'm filming this on Monday at 4:30 p.m. So whatever. Have a say hi, Charlie. Oh, there you are. Hi. Hello. I'm up here. Hello. It's me. All right. Goodbye.